The axe fell with brutal force. A scream was cut short, then another, and another, until only the rhythmic thudding filled the stifling darkness. 8 innocent souls, silently extinguished in their sleep. This was not a nightmare. It was a massacre. You're watching an unbelievable true story, where we only tell real stories. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. It happened in the quiet, God-fearing town of Villisca, Iowa, on the night of June 9, 1912. The victims were the Moore family, Josiah and Sarah, their 4 young children, and 2 visiting friends, the Stillinger sisters. They were targeted in their own home, a place that should have been their sanctuary. Their mistake? Leaving an axe in the yard, a tool the killer would turn into a weapon. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, violent crime was reported at a rate of 16.5 incidents per 1,000 persons in 1993, highlighting the ongoing presence of such threats. Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1993. Understanding basic situational awareness, perhaps even through a local safety course, can truly make a difference. The identity of the monster who committed these unspeakable acts remains a mystery to this day, a chilling shadow over the peaceful town. What really happened in that house and why? The heavy iron blade of the axe caught the dim light of a kerosene lamp. It swung downward, hitting the headboard first before sinking into the skull of Josiah Moore. There was no time for him to cry out. There was no time to protect his wife. In the room next door, 6 children slept, unaware that a shadow was moving through their hallway. The killer wasn't in a rush. He moved like he owned the house. He moved like he'd been watching them for a very long time. This is the story of the Villisca axe murders. To understand how 8 people could lose their lives in a tiny house without a single neighbor hearing a sound, we have to look at who they were. Josiah Moore was 43 years old. People called him Joe. He was the kind of man every small town needs. He was a successful businessman who sold farm implements. He was energetic, well-liked, and known for his sense of humor. Joe had dreams of expanding his business and providing a legacy for his children. His wife, Sarah, was 39. She was the heart of the Presbyterian Church. She spent her days organizing social events and caring for their 4 kids: Herman, 11, Catherine, 10, Boyd, 7, and little Paul, who was only 5. The Moores were a family of routine. Every morning, Joe walked to his shop. Every evening, the family ate together. They were the picture of the American dream in 1912. It was June, but the air was thick and humid. On Sunday, June 9th, the town was buzzing with excitement for the Children's Day program at the church. This was a major event in Villisca. Sarah Moore had coordinated the performances. 2 sisters from a neighboring family, Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8, had asked their parents if they could stay over at the Moore's house after the service so they wouldn't have to walk home in the dark. The program ended around 9:30 p.m. The Moores and the Stillinger sisters walked the few blocks to the house at 508 East 2nd Street. They were laughing and talking about the kids' performances. They went inside, locked the doors, and prepared for bed. But they weren't alone. While the Moores were at church, someone had entered their home. This person didn't break a window or kick down a door. They likely found a way in through an unlocked entry point or had been hiding in the shadows of the porch. Once inside, the killer climbed the stairs to the attic. Imagine the killer sitting in that cramped, hot attic for hours. He could hear the family come home. He heard the sound of the children brushing their teeth. He heard the floorboards creak as Joe and Sarah climbed into their bed in the master bedroom. He heard the quiet whispers of the Stillinger sisters in the guest room downstairs. He waited until the house went silent. He waited until the breathing of the victims became deep and rhythmic. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, violent crime was reported at a rate of 16.5 incidents per 1,000 persons in 1993, showing that even in modern times, safety is never a guarantee. Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1993. This is why many people today look into basic home security or a self-defense course to feel just a bit more prepared for the unthinkable. Around midnight, the killer crawled out of the attic. He was carrying Joe's own axe, which had been left outside earlier that day. He stepped over the threshold into Joe and Sarah's room. The first blow was for Josiah. The killer used the blunt end of the axe first, swinging it so high that the blade gouged the ceiling above the bed. He struck Josiah at least 30 times. Sarah never even had a chance to wake up before she was next. The killer was methodical. He didn't just want them dead. He wanted to destroy them. Once the parents were gone, the killer moved to the children's room. Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul were asleep in 2 beds. One by one, the axe fell. The sound would have been a sickening thud, muffled by the heavy quilts Sarah had meticulously stitched. The killer then walked downstairs. The Stillinger sisters were in the guest bedroom. Lena, the 12-year-old, may have heard something. When police found her later, she was the only victim not lying flat. Her body was angled across the bed, and she had a wound on her arm. It looked like she had tried to ward off the blow. She was the only one who might have seen the face of the monster. But the horror didn't stop with the killing. Most killers flee the scene immediately. This one stayed. He went into the kitchen and found a bowl. He filled it with water and washed his hands, which were stained with the blood of 8 people. He took a plate of food from the icebox and sat at the table. He ate while the house was filled with the silence of the dead. Then, he did something truly strange. He went back to the bodies. He took clothing and bed sheets and draped them over the faces of every single victim. He went to every mirror in the house and covered them with towels and rags. He wanted to make sure the dead couldn't see him, or perhaps he couldn't stand the sight of what he had done reflecting back at him. He took 2 slabs of slab bacon from the kitchen, wrapped them in a towel, and left them on the floor near the axe. Then he walked out the front door, locked it from the outside with a key he found, and disappeared into the Iowa night. The next morning, the sun rose over Villisca just like any other day. The neighbors noticed something was wrong around 7 a.m. Usually, Joe Moore was already out or the kids were playing in the yard. But the Moore house was deathly quiet. The curtains were all drawn tight. A neighbor, Ed Selly, knocked on the door. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. He called Joe's brother, Ross Moore. When Ross arrived, he used his own key to open the front door. He stepped into the darkness of the house and walked toward the downstairs bedroom where the Stillinger sisters were sleeping. He saw the sheets pulled over their heads. He saw the dark stains on the wallpaper. He didn't need to see more. He ran out of the house screaming, "Something is wrong. Something is terrible." When the town marshal arrived and entered the house, he found a scene that would haunt the town for the next century. The smell of blood was overwhelming in the summer heat. The axe was leaning against the wall in the downstairs bedroom. The investigation began immediately, but in 1912, there was no DNA testing. There were no fingerprint databases. The police were overwhelmed. Hundreds of people tramped through the house that day, destroying any footprints or evidence the killer might have left behind. As the news of the Moore family massacre spread, the town of Villisca transformed from a peaceful farming community into a place of pure, unadulterated terror. People didn't just lock their doors, they nailed their windows shut. Fathers sat on their porches with shotguns across their laps, watching the tree line for any movement. The realization that a killer could slaughter 8 people, including 6 children, and vanish without a trace was more than the local psyche could handle. The initial investigation was a disaster. In 1912, the concept of a protected crime scene barely existed. Before the blood had even dried, dozens of curious townspeople had walked through the house, touching furniture and inadvertently wiping away potential clues. The local coroner and the marshal were outmatched by the sheer scale of the brutality. They had 8 bodies and a bloody axe, but no clear motive. Who would want to wipe out the Moore family? Josiah Moore didn't have many enemies, but he did have one major rival, Frank Jones. Frank Jones was a powerful man. He was a state senator and a wealthy businessman who owned a rival implement store. Years prior, Josiah had worked for Jones. When Josiah left to start his own successful business, he took a lucrative contract with John Deere with him. This move reportedly infuriated Jones. The rivalry grew even more bitter due to rumors of an affair between Josiah Moore and Jones's daughter-in-law. The town took sides. Many believed Frank Jones was a man of cold, calculating power who had hired a hitman to take out the man who had insulted his family and hurt his business. Investigators looked into Jones but they couldn't find a smoking gun. There was no physical evidence linking the senator to the crime. However, the suspicion alone was enough to tear the town's social fabric apart for decades. Then, there was the mysterious Reverend George Kelly. Reverend Kelly was a traveling preacher who had been in Villisca for the Children's Day program. He was a small, nervous man who struggled with mental health issues. On the morning the bodies were discovered, Kelly left town on a 5 a.m. train. Witnesses later recalled that he had been acting strangely during the service, watching the Moore family intensely. Kelly eventually confessed to the murders. He told investigators that God had whispered to him, saying, "Slay the children, slay the children." He described the layout of the house with haunting accuracy. It seemed like the case was closed. However, during his trial, it became clear that Kelly was highly suggestible. His confession was inconsistent, and many believe the police had pressured a mentally ill man into admitting to a crime he didn't commit. He was eventually acquitted, leaving the people of Villisca back at square one. The psychological toll on the town was immense. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, violent crime was reported at a rate of 16.5 incidents per 1,000 persons in 1993, a reminder that the threat of violence has always shaped the way we live and protect our families. Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1993. In 1912, the lack of an arrest meant that anyone could be the killer. Neighbors began to eye each other with distrust. One of the most terrifying leads came from the Black Hand, or a traveling serial killer theory. Around the same time as the Villisca murders, several other axe murders occurred across the Midwest. In places like Colorado Springs and Ellsworth, Kansas, entire families were found slaughtered in their beds, their faces covered with cloths and the mirrors in the houses shrouded. This suggested a drifter killer, someone who moved along the railroad lines, picking houses near the tracks, committing unspeakable acts, and then hopping a freight train to the next state. One name that surfaced was William "Blackie" Mansfield. Mansfield was a suspected serial killer who was allegedly linked to axe murders in Illinois and Louisiana. A private investigator hired by the state of Iowa was convinced Mansfield was the Villisca killer. The investigator claimed Mansfield had been hired by Frank Jones, the rival businessman, to carry out the hit. It was a theory that tied the local grudge to a professional killer. But again, the evidence was circumstantial. Mansfield had an alibi for the night of the murders, though some claimed his payroll records had been forged. While the men in suits argued in courtrooms and offices, the house at 508 East 2nd Street stood as a silent witness. After the bodies were removed, the house remained a dark stain on the neighborhood. It was hard to find anyone willing to live there. The blood had soaked deep into the floorboards, and the memory of the children's faces was etched into the mind of every resident. Daily life in Villisca changed. People stopped walking the streets at night. The sound of a train whistle, once a symbol of progress and connection, now brought a chill to the spine of the locals. It was a reminder of how easily a stranger could arrive, destroy a family, and depart. The Moore family had been a beacon of the community. Josiah's dreams of a business empire were gone. Sarah's influence in the church was a void that couldn't be filled. The four Moore children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, would never grow up. And the Stillinger sisters, Lena and Ina, who had only wanted a fun sleepover with their friends, were now part of a tragedy that would be studied by historians for over 100 years. The investigation eventually went cold. The files were tucked away in dusty cabinets. But the house didn't go away. Over the years, stories began to circulate. New owners would move in, only to move out months later. They spoke of things they couldn't explain. They spoke of the air getting cold in the middle of summer and the sound of footsteps in an empty attic. Perhaps the most chilling detail was the sound of a sharpening stone. Some claimed that on quiet nights, you could hear the sound of metal scraping against stone, the sound of someone preparing an axe for a job that was already finished. The lack of closure meant that the spirits of the victims, and perhaps the killer himself, were trapped in a loop of that horrific June night. If only the town had been more prepared, or if the doors had been barred more heavily. Many people today find that taking a basic safety or self-defense course provides a level of mental readiness that the Moore family simply didn't have the chance to employ. As the decades passed, The Axe Murder House became a landmark. But for the descendants of the victims, it was no tourist attraction. It was a place where time stopped. The investigation into the Villisca murders eventually slowed to a crawl, but the house at 508 East 2nd Street refused to be forgotten. As the years turned into decades, the physical structure of the home remained remarkably preserved, almost as if it were stuck in 1912. For the people of Villisca, it was a scar that wouldn't heal. For the rest of the world, it became a focal point for those trying to understand the thin line between the living and the dead. By the 1990s, the house had gained a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. It wasn't just local legend anymore. Professional paranormal investigators, skeptics, and historians began to flock to Iowa. They weren't looking for a killer who was long dead. They were looking for the energy he left behind. One of the most frequent reports from those who spent the night in the house involved the attic dweller. Remember, the killer is believed to have waited in the attic for hours while the Moores were at church. Modern visitors often report the heavy, oppressive feeling of being watched from the darkness of the rafters. Some have even captured audio recordings, electronic voice phenomena, EVP, of a man's voice whispering, "Slay them all," or "I'm sorry." But the most heartbreaking accounts involve the children. In the bedroom where the 4 more children were killed, and the downstairs room where the Stillinger sisters spent their final moments, the activity is different. It isn't threatening, it's playful and confused. Investigators often bring toys into these rooms, simple things like rubber balls or antique dolls. There are numerous videos of these balls rolling across a flat floor, seemingly on their own, or stopping and changing direction as if a small hand had touched them. People have reported feeling a small tug on their clothing or a tiny hand slipping into theirs in the pitch black of the night. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, violent crime was reported at a rate of 16.5 incidents per 1,000 persons in 1993. Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1993. This statistic serves as a grim reminder that while we look at the past with curiosity, the reality of violence is a constant thread in human history. It's why many families today prioritize security and why a simple self-defense course can offer a sense of empowerment that was stolen from the victims in Villisca. In 2014, a dark chapter was added to the house's history. A paranormal investigator was found in the house with a self-inflicted stab wound to the chest. He survived, but he couldn't explain why he had done it. He claimed he had no memory of the act. To some, this was proof that the darkness in the house, the spirit of the killer, was still active and capable of influencing the living. The house was eventually purchased by Darwin and Martha Lynn, who restored it to its 1912 condition. There is no running water. There is no electricity. When the sun goes down, the house is lit only by the flickering glow of lamps, just as it was the night the axe fell. This atmosphere isn't just for show. It's designed to bring the house back to the frequency of the murders. Psychics who have visited the home often describe a loop. They believe the trauma of that night was so intense that it folded time. They claim to see Sarah Moore moving through the kitchen, or the Stillinger sisters whispering about their day at church, completely unaware that a man with an axe is standing just a few feet away in the shadows. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence ever captured was a photo taken in the early 2000s. It appears to show the blurry figure of a young girl in a white dress standing at the top of the stairs. Analysis of the photo showed no signs of tampering. For the family of the Stillingers, who still live in the area, these stories are a double-edged sword. They keep the memory of their relatives alive, but they also turn a family tragedy into a ghost story. The closet in the upstairs bedroom is another hotspot. It's a small, cramped space where many believe the killer hid for a short time after the murders, perhaps watching the stairs to see if anyone would come. Visitors often report that the door to this closet will open or shut on its own, regardless of how many times it is latched. Despite the hauntings, the mystery of who did it still hangs over the town. The rivalry between Joe Moore and Frank Jones is still discussed in local diners. The preacher, George Kelly, is still a favorite suspect for those who believe the crime had a religious, ritualistic element. and the drifter theory remains the most logical explanation for how someone could kill 8 people and vanish into the night. The Villisca axe murders changed how we view small-town safety. Before 1912, people in the Midwest rarely locked their doors. They trusted their neighbors. They trusted the night. After June 10th, that trust was gone forever. The axe wasn't just a weapon used on a family. It was a weapon used on the American sense of security. As the wind whistles through the cracks in the old wooden siding of the Moore house, you can't help but feel that the story isn't over. The house is a monument to a moment of pure evil, a place where 8 lives were cut short for reasons we may never truly understand. This story is based on real events reported by police and news sources. While the town of Villisca was busy accusing local senators and eccentric preachers, a much larger and more terrifying pattern was emerging across the United States. Between 1911 and 1912, a string of strikingly similar murders occurred along the Midwestern railroad lines. These weren't just random acts of violence. They were signatures of a ghost. In September 1911, in Colorado Springs, a family of 6 was found murdered in their beds. The weapon? An axe. The mirrors? Covered with cloths. The windows? Shrouded. Just weeks later, in Monmouth, Illinois, a similar scene was discovered. Then came Ellsworth, Kansas. Each time, the killer targeted a house near the train tracks. Each time, he used the blunt end of an axe. Each time, he displayed a bizarre obsession with covering the faces of the dead. The Black Hand theory suggested that the Moore family weren't victims of a local grudge, but targets of opportunity for a traveling serial killer. This man lived in the hobo jungles near the rail yards, hopping freight trains and scouting towns for the perfect house. One close to the tracks with an easy escape route. The name that kept appearing in investigators' files was William Blackie Mansfield. Mansfield was a man with a dark history and a heavy hand. A private detective named James Newton Wilkerson became obsessed with Mansfield. Wilkerson spent years tracking the man, convinced he was the link between all the Midwestern axe murders. He discovered that Mansfield had been in the vicinity of several of the crime scenes. The most damning piece of evidence was Mansfield's arrest for the murder of his own wife, child, and mother-in-law in Blue Island, Illinois, 2 years after the Villisca tragedy. The method was identical: an axe, covered mirrors, and a silent escape. Yet, despite Wilkerson's best efforts, Mansfield was never charged with the Villisca crimes. He had an alibi, payroll records from a packing plant in another state, that the authorities chose to believe, even though Wilkerson claimed they were forged by Mansfield's powerful associates. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, violent crime was reported at a rate of 16.5 incidents per 1,000 persons in 1993, highlighting that even with modern technology, the shadow of violence persists. Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1993. This reality is why many people today invest time in a local safety course or home security. It's about closing the window of opportunity that killers like Mansfield looked for. The possibility that the killer was a stranger who simply moved on is perhaps the most frightening conclusion of all. It meant that the person responsible for the Moore massacre might have lived out his days in another state, perhaps even committing more crimes, while the people of Villisca tore themselves apart with suspicion. The legacy of the Villisca axe murders isn't just in the bloodstains or the ghost stories. It's in the way the town changed. The Moore home was eventually sold, then sold again. It passed through the hands of people who tried to make it a normal home, but the house wouldn't allow it. Tenants reported the smell of kerosene when no lamps were lit. They reported the sound of a heavy object being dragged across the attic floor. One family moved out after their young daughter claimed to have seen a man with a long knife standing at the foot of her bed. Not an axe, but a man who looked like he was waiting for orders. In the final analysis, the Villisca story is one of missed moments. If Josiah had brought the axe inside that night, if the Stillinger sisters hadn't stayed over, if the neighbor had heard just one floorboard creak, the what-ifs are what keep the house alive in the public imagination. Today, the house stands as a grim museum. It reminds us that evil doesn't always have a face we recognize. Sometimes it's a shadow in the attic. Sometimes it's a stranger on a train. The Moore family, Josiah, Sarah, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, and the Stillinger girls, Lena and Ina, are buried in the local cemetery. Their headstones are a quiet testament to a night that never truly ended. The mystery remains. The house remains. And according to those who have braved the night inside those walls, the killer remains, too, waiting in the silence, watching the stairs, and making sure the mirrors stay covered. It's a reminder to always look twice at the shadows in your own home. Not because you're afraid, but because you're prepared. Every story has an ending, but some wounds never close. The Villisca axe murders are a dark chapter in the American heartland, a mystery that challenges us to remember the victims and stay vigilant in a world that can change in a single heartbeat.